Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Monica. I'm the co-chair of the NextGen London group. If you've never attended any of our events before, we are a group that is focused on sharing knowledge and providing networking opportunities for PR and comms professionals from the earlier stages in their careers. And today we are going to be talking about different career paths that you can really take within the industry, because we had the impression that a lot of us are either working agency or in-house, and sometimes we can have like a clouded view of what it really is, but there's actually so much more to it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We want to showcase how many different career paths there are within the industry. And I'm so pleased that we have two great speakers today who will tell us their stories about how they transitioned between roles, how they went freelance, started their own companies, and they're going to share some tips and lessons for anyone who would maybe want to follow a similar path in the future. In terms of some housekeeping, there's going to be a discussion first, and after that, we're going to open the room to questions from the audience. Throughout the event, you can use the Q&A function and ask any questions right away. We really would like this to be more of a conversation than a presentation. So feel free to jump in with any questions, and we'll try to answer as many as possible, either during the course of the event or at the end of the event when we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A. That's it from me. I'm going to hand it over now to my co-chair, Olivia, who's going to introduce our speakers and kick off the discussion.
Yes. Hi everyone. So my name is Olivia, and as Monica said, I'm a fellow co-chair of the NextGen group. I'm also customer success manager at the Work Crowd, and the Work Crowd is basically a tech-enabled platform with a global network of freelancers and clients across the PR, marketing, and communication space. So with us today, we have Lala Cooper, who is a content and communications consultant, and we also have Rana Rahman, who is the founder of Raptor PR, an agency for global tech, media, and video game brands. So as Monica just said, the purpose of today is to delve into just how many different career paths there are within the PR and comms industry, and hopefully we'll be able to share some insightful tips and tricks on how you can get where you want to go and get the career that you want. So as she said, we're going to start off with our panel discussion, but yeah, please do put any questions in the chat as we go, and we'll try and answer as many as possible. So let's kick off then. So Lala, why don't we start with you? Maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you currently do.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Lala Cooper, and I've worked in the intersection of PR, communications, and content for a little bit over 8 years now. That's very sort of circular around in-house agency and now freelance. And I launched my freelance business called Line Content last year. I currently work with about 7, soon to be 8 clients, and that's very much in the range of brand narrative, communications and content, and all around the world. So very, very fortunate to have a bit of diversity there.
And Rana?
I'm Rana. Yep, I am founder and MD of Raptor PR. The agency was born in the pandemic, and it supports video games, media, now Web3 brands. So prior to that, I've got 20 plus years of comms experience. Started out in the dot-com boom in the early noughties and worked for a whole bunch of agencies from your large Hello Knowltons and MSNLs, but also transitioned to a huge amount of freelance roles like Shine Communications and Red and so forth. So yeah, I've been around the block a lot, aware of lots of the opportunities and challenges, but yeah, there's a huge amount of opportunity for young talent to learn and absorb and move across the industry.
Just to focus quickly on what you're both doing at the moment. So what was it that sort of drove you to where you both are now? Was there a moment perhaps where you sort of thought, right, I'm going to make a change, and that's how you ended up where you are now?
With Raptor, so I've got to be honest, so I was in a really comfortable freelance position, freelance life, senior consultant for massive brands like Ionity, PlayStation and so forth. The pandemic hits, and my pipeline just crashed. I was deemed as an expensive appendage. Adversity, necessity. I looked at the markets. I saw there was a need for, a really professional B2B comms agency for the games industry. There wasn't one really available. I looked at my network, and I basically created a gamified brand for Raptor PR, and it just took off in the pandemic. High gaming audiences, really lucrative markets, had a massive network of people I met whilst freelancing. And yeah, that's how I got here now. So we've got a team of 14, 6 people on payroll, work with lots of freelancers. So yeah, that's how I got to where I am today. So it's necessity, and also just my drive to do something I really love. And I've been gaming since the early 80s. Just combining those two passions just paid off professionally and personally.
I think that's quite a logical answer. That's quite a logical decision making. You know, your life, you know, sort of looked at your pipeline. I'm trying to think about, you know, how I came to the conclusion. I think it was a lot more emotive than that. And absolutely, I'm quite a lateral and logical thinker. But I definitely kind of have that instinct of, this is going to work out because I'm going to make it work out. And that was certainly my sort of big sort of catalyst decision into going freelance full time. I'd flirted with freelance for many years, and that was just partially because I wanted to do something a little bit different, and partially because I hate sitting still for, you know, longer than 5 minutes. And I think it was probably like a lot of people during the pandemic, I realized I was working for an agency, and I realized this just isn't working anymore. You know, it was very much a case of I had done it for quite a few years. I had, you know, a lot of agency and in-house background, and suddenly realized if I'm going to be working extreme amounts of overtime and kind of in this really sort of high demand career, why not let's make it sort of work for me and for myself a little bit more. And that's how I landed very specifically with Goldline, and it sort of flourished from there, really.
And what's been the biggest sort of challenges, I suppose, you've faced in that sort of move from, you know, both of you, because I know that you've both done sort of permanent freelance. What's the biggest sort of challenges that you've both maybe faced with that?
I think for me, I transitioned. So I went from permanent full-time roles to a contract role where I could then sort of introduce my freelance work throughout that. And it felt like taking it in bite-sized pieces, which I must admit is very uncharacteristic of me. I'm normally just full throttle, let's do it and see what happens. But I definitely had that transition period, so it was a little bit simpler. But challenge-wise, I think, you know, creating the infrastructure around your own sort of freelance brand, whether or not you're doing that under an umbrella or whether you're doing that just as a personal brand, it certainly comes with a lot of questions about how you are going to present yourself and how you're going to kind of represent yourself in the market. And I think that was a big challenge for me, of trying to figure out precisely where the sweet spot was. And with that comes a lot of questions of, okay, I know I did this with this company and I really liked that and I think it worked, and it, you know, it sort of it drove a lot of success and engagement. But over here, this, you know, I'd rather do it like this, and really figuring out exactly how your methodology and your processes can take the absolute best of what you've already done, but definitely still put your own spin on it, which is, you know, the whole purpose of going freelance or creating your own agency, I suppose.
Going freelance is a no-brainer for me back in the day, and I actually can't remember when I did go first freelance. Maybe it was like late noughties. But fundamentally, thinking back on it, it was like I used to see these freelancers having a great lifestyle, and that's something which I thought was great. I think fundamentally, a problem with lots of agencies is that they pay their staff really badly at the junior level. It's a huge problem in the industry. Raptor PR signed up to the PRCA's charter to pay interns fair wage, and that's something which we absolutely support. And, you know, anyone who comes under Raptor has a, you know, an above market salary. So for me personally, it was a commercial option, but two, I just wanted to work with a really, you know, I wanted to work with the best brands, work with the best agencies, and just really expand my mind and network. So that was something I found really appealing. And a criticism which I was which was often leveled at me, was like, oh, you never learn anything whilst freelancing. It's absolute bollocks. I learned so much working with, like, you know, Rachel Bell at Shine, Rana Reeves at Shine, the guys at Gin Digital, just absolutely increased my skill set, met some more people. And all of these experiences and the network absolutely contributed to, you know, what I'm trying to do with Raptor PR, which is, you know, just a very authentic comms model, which people can really get behind in terms of what the staff wants. Challenges, I think, is personal, the leap from permanent to consultant, but it's not for everybody. You got to kind of have a bit of a thick skin and confidence in yourself and your service. Some people are much more happy being in permanent employment. Like my wife will never set up her own legal firm. She's very happy to spend like 8 years, 9 years with her firm. Whereas, you know, many other consultants, they just want to be working in a really stable permanent employment. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think post-COVID, I think the opportunities to be a bit more fluid in terms of your career path definitely opened up. I think there's just tremendous opportunity for people who are slightly more bold to go the freelance route, but there's definitely, you know, a lot of agencies out there I've met who are working with long-term freelance talent. I mean, part of the model of Raptor is just offering the best of minds for each client brief. And, you know, we may have like some of the skills in-house, but if we don't have a fashion freelancer, which is like what we did a few weeks ago, we'll bring that in. So we're into like building long-term relationships. So yeah, I think that's hopefully answers some of the question.
That's really helpful. And so you think that's the type of person that would kind of suit that freelance role then, you know, someone who's quite bold, a little bit thick-skinned. Would you guys have any more advice for people who maybe wanted to sort of either go down the freelance route or start their own sort of business? What sort of advice would you give them?
I think you definitely need a number of years experience under your belt. It's not something I jump into at like AJ, SAE level. Ideally, you kind of need that kind of longish stint at the beginning of your career. But, you know, life is not always, you know, a steady line. You might need to go freelance at SAE. But if you do, I wouldn't stay at that level for too long, because I generally think you're strongest if you're freelance, if you have some strategic understanding of what you're doing, rather than just being a tactical gun for hire, which is fine. But I've been thinking of the mindset of the last few weeks that if you hit the AD level, you're a strong AD, then I think you're pretty much set up to run your own agency. You just need confidence and network to do that. At the more junior level, yes, you do get lots of AM freelancers, but they kind of lack in strategic understanding of why they're doing the stuff they're doing and really understanding that backdrop research bits. But I do think it needs a certain level of confidence and market expertise and, you know, just solid results behind you to be able to go freelance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think if I was, you know, 19 again, starting out in my career and decided to go freelance, then it would have just completely followed it. And yeah, I mean, the argument of resilience is completely accurate. For me, resilience is having that thick skin, and it's being able to kind of bounce off the pavement whenever you hit a fall. It's also being able to tap into an empathy and a sensitivity that will enable you to kind of build those relationships that actually you really need, regardless whether you're in an in-house or an agency or go freelance. And actually some people that I work with now, some of my clients, are people that I had worked with years ago in an agency environment, that their situation had changed and they approached me. And a lot of the feedback that I had was that, yes, I was simple and straightforward to work with and I did the job, but actually that I was an empathetic person who kind of got to the nitty-gritty of the pain point and whatever that is. And I think that's quite a specialist skill. I think for me in my early 20s, probably got a little bit too caught up in the hustle and hustle culture and feeling really like I just needed to I was doing 60, 65-hour work weeks, and I thought that that was completely normal. It accelerates your career and it accelerates your experience in a way that is pretty incomparable. But then comparatively, you're left with this kind of shell of an understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it. You have no strategic overview, as Rana says. You have no kind of, you just have to do the work. And actually, you know, when you stand back and you are considered and you're meaningful, you are going to learn that much more, and you're going to be able to apply it in various different degrees. I have no personal regrets about how I, you know, went about my career. But the hustle culture was something that I absolutely had to make a concentrated effort to abandon and to leave. You know, it's not sustainable, and it's not why we are here. It's not how you really necessarily want to continue on in your career, however ambitious you might be. It's very different.
That's a really interesting point, actually. Just focusing on that sort of, as you're saying, that early stage of your career. And Rana, it'd be good to get your input here as well. What sort of advice would you have for people who are in that early stage of their career and, you know, they want to make the right decisions to get them, you know, where you guys perhaps are now? What sort of advice would you give them in terms of what sorts of roles they should be looking for, you know, how they approach things? What would you say?
I think fundamentally, you should be PR and stuff you love or have a genuine interest for. It just makes such a difference, you know. It's an obvious bonus, and if you're not there at the moment, you need to try and make moves to eventually end up in a sector that you love. I didn't start on tech PR. I started out in healthcare PR, ethical healthcare, hardcore B2B pharma stuff. But I moved across slowly, and it took a few years to get there. I mean, it actually took me about 8 years to reach 7 years to actually work on PlayStation 3, which really set my consumer tech PR career into overdrive. So recommendations are to, you know, it is tough to get into PR. Sometimes you start in places where you don't want to be, and you might be envious of your colleagues in like the consumer division or a fashion division, wherever it is. But you can make some steps, whether that's, you know, do some blog content, just do something proactive, so you can demonstrate to an employer you've got a genuine interest in the space. For example, I've been contacted recently by this really smart 17-year-old kid who's doing his A-levels. He's writing for a games blog. He's a really strong writer. He engaged me really professionally, and we're chatting to him about a short-term work placement. So that kind of initiative really help you get to the point where you're working on stuff you love. Whether it's, you want to continue doing the permanent routes, or if you're going on a freelance route. I think with the freelance routes, freelance route is coupled with being a bit more commercial. But in my mind, selling stories, selling consultancy are just 2 steps removed. And that's actually a fact which most consultants don't actually know. But people by people, just as Lala said, it's all about, you know, being in tune with the people you're speaking to over the monitor, over the table, over the phone, just being able to connect. That's, I think, partial skill, partial gift, something which people can work on. It's just having that emotional intelligence and building on that. But things like, you know, whatever level you're at, I think you can work on your personal brand. Like, I created all this because A, I'm a massive nerd. B, it was during lockdown, right? I was basically, you know, without any clients for a few months. I had to do something to stand out. I was like using monitoring tools to track competitors. Anyway, I created this personal brand identity, ramped up my content on LinkedIn, and it generally worked. This morning I was chatting to,
name it, you know, the issues were coming through.
Rayan, you want to pop yourself on mute?
How many people were testing positive for COVID? What did that mean to our?
There we go.
Okay.
Carry on.
Yeah, so recommendations for, you know, boosting your career earlier on, I'd say personal brand, passion, and just really understanding what's going to make you happy. And only you know what's going to be a driver to make you happy. With Raptor, I want to give kids a chance who might not normally be from public school backgrounds or don't have degrees, but can demonstrate to me they've got the passion and some skills to come on board, which we can mold. So that's something which I want to do. You know, 20 plus years in the industry, I've got kind of a picture of what challenges are. You know, I'm looking to develop a very diverse and neurodiverse group of people. And I think we have appealed to the people we're selling to because we just do the things slightly bit different. But only I know the path which is going to make me happy, because I want to do something slightly different and, you know, fulfills me. But as a candidate or someone with 1 to 3 years experience, you need to kind of map out your passions, you know, your offering to the markets, and then shape your strategy according to those initial starting points.
Yeah, I was going to say I couldn't agree more, but it's just it's following your train of thought. I think my career was really born out of necessity. I started in a volunteer role because I had a passion project about something that was very, very close to me. And, you know, I think I had to take a step back at some stage and assess, actually, is this really what I want to do? And is this what I'm really meant to do? I fell in love with communications and PR and kind of event coordination through content, because I happened to sort of stumble upon it in a roundabout way. It all sounds very ambiguous. And when I took a step back and assessed, actually, is this really what I want to do? And I thought, yes, it is. I absolutely knew that I wanted to follow the communications route because I'm by nature a writer and a words person. So it made complete sense for me to do that alongside other kind of hobbies. And I think that I didn't really necessarily have a sector that I wanted to go into right off the bat, but mother of necessity and all, I absolutely needed to find something right then and there. And I think what I did was try lots of different routes, lots and lots of different sort of sectors and industries. I worked in internal communications around, say, benefits, healthcare, pension, an awful lot of that. I worked in content strategy for a wide range of clients, and then I worked with PR and comms very narrowly in kind of maritime and logistics. And it gave me a really strong flavor of, actually, just because you are in communications doesn't mean you're going to be doing the exact same thing for 2 different clients. It doesn't work like that. It's an exceptionally diverse discipline in and of itself. And I think taking that and then utilizing it to my own benefit was probably the strongest tool that I had. I knew that I loved what I did, but I would do content strategy and I would miss comms, and I would do comms and I would miss PI, you know, so I didn't want to pigeonhole myself in many respects. And I think if you don't necessarily have I really want to do that, that's perfect for me, totally fine, absolutely perfect. Or if you don't have the time and the resources to really consider exactly where you're going, also fine, also perfect. But taking one step forward is absolutely the necessity, and you have to do it regardless. And Ron's completely right. That proactivity it will save your bacon time and time again. The amount of times that we've all been somewhere where we thought, I cannot do this anymore, or I am running so low on clients or so low on my pipeline. What am I going to do? Do something. It actually doesn't really matter that much. You have to do something that's going to take you that next step.
And that raises a really interesting point when you were sort of talking about how when you first started, you did a whole sort of range, you know, across industry, across sector. What's been the main sort of, I suppose, difference, you know, because I know that you've both done kind of like hyper-focused sector industry, and then also, you know, for example, if you're an agency and you're working on a broad range of accounts, broad range of clients, freelancing, broad range of clients. What's the main sort of difference there?
Probably a difference in honing very specific skills in each discipline. That would be a big thing for me. I think a lot of people really love having that narrow focus. I did for a long time. I really enjoyed it. You learn an awful lot about very specific things. I know an awful lot more about pensions than your typical late 20 something, and that's a great skill, by the way, to have. You know, I love that, and I think naturally I'm personally a very curious person, which kind of only furthers the ability to pick things up, and it's wonderful. I'm also quite a jittery person, and I like having the diversity because it's extremely challenging and it kind of enables my curiosity and my creativity. I think for me personally, that's probably what I struggled with most, being in a permanent role, whether that was in-house or agency side. I really struggled with not having the strategic and creative freedom, and knowing that actually if I didn't feel like a client's work was successful, there wasn't always a lot that I could do to change that because I didn't necessarily have the freedom. Whereas, you know, my situation now, I take client counsel and client recommendations and advice extremely seriously. And if something isn't working, that's a conversation that we need to have. So I think for me, it was a very, very natural course of action where the frustration of this isn't really working for a client, but I can't do anything about it. And I'll just have to just carry on ticking over the wheels. It didn't work.
Sorry, Olivia.
No, I was just saying the difference between, you know, working in a high focus. So at the moment, you know, you're working with tech game brands, but obviously in the past you've worked with a range of sectors and industries.
Yeah. It's like the foundation. I was just thinking back to what I was like when in my career, and to be honest, I wasn't that like super career focused. It's like I love this space, right? I love the tech, and there was the social bit was great, and that was like a big part of the job. But thinking back on it, working across, you know, like healthcare, I did like, you know, travel insurance for like the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, but all that stuff gave me a strong foundation in terms of, you know, the nuts and bolts of like regional relations, or, you know, how to plan and research a comm strategy. So it gave me that foundation. At the same time, in your mind, you got to think, well, what do I really want out of my career? And, you know, you need to steer it, you know, progressively. But, you know, if I was talking to my 25-year-old self, he probably wasn't too bothered about steering that much, as long as I was generally doing something quite enjoyable. It's been absolutely frank, you know, I wasn't this career focused back, say, 20 years ago, not by any stretch of the imagination. But now I'm executive, I don't sleep. It's literally Raptor every single second of the day. But, you know, if you're in the early 20s, you kind of need to start thinking about, you know, where you want to take it. But, you know, learn as much as you can, understand why you're doing the stuff you're doing, why you're calling these journalists, or what's the strategy behind it. It's like, why? I think that's fundamentally where you need to be. And at some point, something will click, you go, all right, I get it now. I can apply this theory to a whole different range of industries, like, you know, it could be insurance or pensions, wherever, you know, really drives you.
That's really interesting. So I was just going to ask a question now. So obviously COVID, we all know, has changed hugely the way that we work, the way that we interact with people. And I was wondering how, you know, how has that sort of changed the way that you guys work with clients, you know, with colleagues? How has that changed for you? And do you have any advice for people who are maybe struggling with that?
It's you know, it's a massive impact. The world will never be the same again. In some ways, I think the working world is going to improve. I don't think 5 days a week in an office is the way forward for any company in the world anymore. We've shown that technology can help, but, you know, we meet up now once a week because we just, honestly, when we do meet up, we actually do very little work. We just have a laugh in the office, and we work more to do, just go through stuff. But it's really important to have that human connection. There's some other things, like it's difficult for me to teach like telephone pitching. It's like it's a bit of an alien concept, but I was brought up, you know, Rana, call those journalists up and, you know, just deal with it. But I can't do that for my staff because I'm not that of a severe taskmaster. But, you know, I want to show through example, and the only way I could do that is in person. So it's like, you know, journalists are back at their desks, you know, spoke to the FT, Telegraph. So I think like a hybrid way of working, certainly right for Raptor, can't speak for all organizations. And, you know, meeting clients was like last year, didn't meet them until like later in the year. That was tough. And it was quite weird meeting them, you know, first time in real life. I think the world is opening up again now. We're doing classic things like journalist lunches and taking clients out and so forth. So it's a good thing because, you know, as Lala said, it's about the relationship, you know, to connect with somebody, and, you know, the dynamics of meeting people in real life, whether client or employee or colleague, it just massively changes when you see somebody. I'm all for that, but at the same time, you know, I asked my staff, do you want to go 5 days a week? And said, no, we don't want to. Because some of them live like, you know, in Harrow and, you know, East London, all over the place. I wouldn't want to put them through commuting every day like what I did. They don't need to do that anymore. And I hope the whole industry, well, it doesn't need to go back to 5 days a week in an office, because I find that kind of productive to one's mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, for me, to play devil's advocate, what do I miss from the office? I learn through osmosis. I absolutely do. And as a freelancer, you get comparatively little of that. You have to be extremely resourceful in how you are learning and how you are kind of adapting your techniques and honing your skills. And absolutely the social side of it. Again, you need to be very creative with how you are building relationships with people. And for me, like I said, out of everything, I think the relationships that I have with my clients and with partners that I tend to work with is the most important aspect of what I do and why I do it. I can't emphasize that enough. I think it is, how do I word this diplomatically? I think it is very silly for businesses to assume that we are going to just return to how things were. We've had a massive shift, and this back and forth of, we think it's great for you to come in the office. Full time is just, it doesn't work anymore. That is one quick fire way to lose your talent. That's it. If you can't adapt, then you can't adapt. But for me, you know, I do absolutely miss having colleagues. I do absolutely miss those moments in the office, like Rana says, actually just interacting. You can learn a lot from interacting with the people that you work with. It doesn't necessarily have to be so focused. But I think, you know, if I'm going to be really, really honest, I grew up with disability, with chronic health problems, and my most significant takeaway was that they were okay with you saying that you needed adaptations, but a lot of the time they weren't okay when it actually came to doing it and when it came into practice. And I think I had a moment where, like I said, I was really on that hustle culture and I was really all about my career. That hasn't changed, but it has shifted. And I've realized during the pandemic, it's like, yes, this is my career, but it's my life. Like, this is my life. And, you know, simple things like, a lot of people who are, say, neurodiverse, they can't necessarily take a lot of the sensory overload that happens in an office, or people who, you know, have physical disabilities, they can't necessarily sit straight for the entire day. And actually, when you think about it, there's probably more employees who have some kind of need for a different way of working than there is a singular track. I think we need to kind of broaden our understanding of that and broaden our understanding of what it means to be employed and to work in an office or to work with others. It was the perfect opportunity for me because I knew that I had to make changes in order to kind of live the life that I wanted. But it was also, yes, absolutely a light bulb moment of thinking, oh my goodness, I've been so focused on where my career is going that I've forgotten where my life is going. And that's a pretty key difference. Being freelance isn't about being able to go out for coffee when you want, or being able to sleep in, or it's not even about picking and choosing the work that you do. It is about living your life in a considered, meaningful way and making sure that your work is adapted around that.
I love the point you mentioned about osmosis. It just made me realize that the bulk of my freelancing was actually done in the client's office.
Right.
And then it's like stuff I learned in my career was probably through osmosis. I actually do have training programs for my team and I sit down with them, but in my professional upbringing and training, it was literally just listening to people chatting and talking. So if you are, you know, if I were to go freelance today, if I was working from home, I probably wouldn't have the same experience because you're just not seeing or hearing or all that stuff by osmosis. So I think you need to take that into consideration. Launching into a freelance career today is somewhat different from what I experienced. I think having that interface or just being aware, you know, just hearing and seeing people chat, you just pick stuff up. So that I think, you know, some IRL is quite necessary if you're like AMAD level. It would certainly help. I would have found it really difficult, you know, and quite lonely perhaps to do a full-time freelance role, unless you're okay with that. But I think to progress and to learn, osmosis is a key thing. I took it for granted, and especially during lockdown, you know, got AMs and interns. It was tough. teaching them virtually. So they couldn't listen to me or Thomas when the other senior guys chat. You know, they rarely heard me speak on the phone. Not that I could get through as many journalists during the pandemic. But now that's why, you know, it's important that, yeah, my team do hear me at least once a week in person. So
Yeah,
I think a hybrid approach
gives you that what if,
yeah,
isn't it? You know, you can. It's when I read something, or even if I'm watching something, I'm like, that's nice.
Yeah.
So, like, what you know, what is that actually teaching me? What is that? How am I applying that? If you hear other people doing it in practice, it makes a lot more contextual sense.
Yeah.
No, definitely. That's really interesting. We actually did have a question that was sort of around freelancing, about that work-life balance that you were speaking about. And it's do you think that going freelance is the only way to have that complete control over your own hours, working flexibly, you know, taking control of your, you know, life in that way? Or do you think there are, you know, agencies out there, you know, in-house brands out there who are starting to maybe introduce this more?
I think, you know, every business has its own specific business needs. I think it's down to the employee to negotiate something. If, you know, if they want to work 3 days a week, for example, I'm not opposed, you know, if one of my team came to me with that, but, you know, you need to have that chat about it. I certainly hope employers would be a bit more flexible. But from an agency point of view, it's like, clients usually 5 days a week, so that's a consideration to take care of. So I can't really comment on in-house because I don't know that many in-house comms pros. Lala, what do you think?
Yeah, I think in-house is probably, thinking back to my in-house days, which was a long time ago and pre-pandemic, but it is probably less likely. However, I think there's two cases here. You can say everyone gets kind of a blanket understanding. For example, if you are working in an agency or if you're working in-house, everyone gets a blanket understanding that they can work flexibly. However, there are certain conditions or caveats. Or you can treat it person by person and say, okay, well, this person has children that, you know, in this situation, you know, is in this particular situation or whatever. But of course, you run the risk of alienating and causing resentment. And I think that that is probably the most significant blocker. I know of agencies who have done that. They've said, this person wants to live in a completely different time zone, and therefore they're going to work here. It doesn't necessarily work. And I think that's probably for professionals, especially younger professionals, the central challenge of being able to approach an employer and say, this is how I would like to work. At the end of the day, I think it's really important that we don't get disillusioned. A business is a business, and it is there to do whatever it is that they're there to do. And, you know, as much as I'm touting about work, you know, suiting your life, I completely believe that is so true, but it's never going to suit everyone at all times. And I think the other really important argument here is that, you know, just because you are a freelancer, you work for yourself or whatever, it doesn't actually mean you always get to pick your hours. There are always going to be conditions, and there are always going to be flexibilities around other people. I have specific client calls at certain times that sometimes I don't love, but it's fine. Like that is work-life balance. It's work and life working together. And I think that, yeah, anyone going into it, I would just say, I still get up pretty much the same time as I did before, and I still have my ginormous dog to walk, and I still have all of my other responsibilities. There are going to be times that you work really long days, really long days. But if that's what you want to do, it enables you to have that freedom of other aspects, and you might be able to take an afternoon off without having to ask someone. That's really nice.
Actually, a good, over the last few days, I've been chatting to my external HR woman, Lorraine. So basically, it's a benefits package, but it's how things have changed over the last few decades. So health is actually the first component, and that's like, you know, physical, mental well-being. This is, you know, I went, wow, is this stuff current? You know, I'm being educated, but it's like, yes, Rana, these are standard packages. You know, these are all the stuff for your staff. So it's very much, you know, I'm being educated and learning. It's actually absolutely true. But you know, agencies, in-house teams need to take into consideration the mental health of the staff. You know, I myself need downtime, otherwise I will get jittery and make mistakes. Human beings make mistakes when they're tired. You know, we've all been there. So, you know, if one of my staff members or even me just needs to work 4 days a week, that's definitely a conversation we should have. You know, I don't think the world should go back to slogging away 5 days a week relentlessly, because let's face it, no one works 5 days a week full pelt. At the end of the week, usually shatters. I think we can acknowledge that. Of course, their business needs to be met, but I think the pandemic has shown us that we are human beings. We're slightly fragile in some respects. We can't be pushed too hard. Of course, there are times when we do need to work these ridiculous hours, but you know, those are unsustainable in the long term as diminishing returns. It's like, you know, if you're working on something at 8 o'clock, you might as well just close your laptop and wake up the next morning and do it with a fresh head. So yeah, I think things are changing in the right direction. And you know, I've been studying other agencies' packages because I need to create something compelling. This is the real candidate shortage out there. You guys know it's a massive drought. And I think the agencies and organizations which are succeeding are the ones which are capable of potentially giving a package which may make someone happier. That could be slightly less hours, you know, subscriptions to the Calm app or mental health away days, or spa days. This is stuff which candidates really wanting now. And this is what I've been taught by my HR experts.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, if there was one thing that I could say that I absolutely never did when I was working for other people, was negotiate your package. I never ever did it. And the amount of times that I speak to you know, my peers and my friends now who are moving into new roles or whatever, and they negotiate their job title, they negotiate their pension contributions. I never did it because I always felt grateful to have a role. It doesn't work like that. This is a business transaction. As soon as you start a business transaction, you should absolutely be thinking about how on earth we can make this work for two people. And that starts at the offer stage. I absolutely wish I had. I negotiate with myself now. I do. I negotiate with myself.
I did the same. I just accepted contracts, but now it's like everything's negotiable. Like everything, every single point. And yeah, more and more candidates are doing that. But I never did that early in my career. I was just, I'll take it.
So you would definitely recommend doing that now then to people?
But I think candidates, from what I've seen, my experience, they are literally, you know, asking more about the fine detail. You know, because I do a lot of biz dev, it's kind of inbuilt in me right now, but recommendations for, you know, people with 1 to 4 years experience, absolutely ask about number of days. You know, you don't need to say yes straight away. It's, as Lala said, it's a negotiation. It's a discussion.
Listen, so we're coming into the Q&A portion now, so if anyone's got any sort of questions, do pop them in the chat. We've had a comment here saying, really interesting what you were saying about supporting the more junior members of the team remotely, and you know, it's really important to find ways to make sure that they, you know, don't miss out on development opportunities, you know, hybrid working from home and entirely from the office. So yeah, any other thoughts that you have on that would be really helpful.
Well, I obviously don't have any employees, and it's not in my business model trajectory to gain any. It's not how I would like to progress. One thing I'll say is, when I was moving from kind of the advocacy space that I was in into, I had a very short internship with Oxford University Press, and then I moved on to agency. Those kind of initial jolts of doing something quite specific in the comms and PR sphere, going into something a little bit more general, that was very much already a molded, structured space. I struggled a lot, and I honestly, there were moments where I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I mean, I can't actually emphasize that enough. I had no clue whatsoever what I was doing. And there were two people in particular who really mentored me and took me under their wing and spent as long as they possibly could explaining things to me, showing me the ropes in every single sense, explaining certain commercial decisions, which is a really vital part to the freelance world as well. And I think without that, I wouldn't have gotten here. But I will say that, you know, that was something that for me, I had always wanted to do. It was always kind of in my ambitions to be a mentor, a coach around careers and a little bit broader. And once I had that for a couple of years, I was then able to kind of execute it differently. So I would say, you know, don't be hesitant to absolutely ask for a mentor, ask for help, whatever, but also offer it. And it doesn't really necessarily matter what stage of career you're in. If you have an insight, share it with someone who looks like they're struggling, because my goodness, if I didn't have that, I'm not sure if I'd be here. Really, you know, it's peer-on-peer mentorship is massively beneficial.
Mm. So Raptor, currently we've got an entirely senior model, but we are recruiting for, you know, a JAE. Now, you know, we're going hybrids. I think that's basically what I need. FaceTime. So does my account directors and account managers. We literally need to spend time in person. You know, over lockdown, it was difficult. We had an intern, it didn't work out. No fault in this individual, but it was just incredibly difficult to work and teach remotely. Now we move into, you know, a hybrid model. It's just given that, you know, that one-to-one structure, being quite, you know, just being super organized, asking the questions, understanding why they're doing their daily tasks, what's going to happen ahead, deciphering the KPIs, what it means for them. So it's, you know, if you're struggling as a junior member, you need to sit down and go to your AM or AD and just work out a plan to get you back on track. You know, it's absolutely a two-way process to enable junior staff to thrive in this current environment. This is very different compared to the 5 days in the office routine. So you don't have that osmosis. You're missing out on a lot of interface and learning. So I think teaching junior staff at the moment is incredibly challenging for all agencies, from what I've heard, especially the virtual route. So it needs to be, you know, a lot of one-to-one tuition, either if that's virtually or ideally IRL.
Interestingly, actually, so I, you know, joined the work crowd relatively recently, and obviously post-pandemic, hybrid, and I found it difficult because, you know, it's difficult to jump into that situation and be able to, you know, learn everything you need to learn. But, you know, what we found really useful is just being able to pick up the phone whenever, whatever time of day, be on the phone pretty much all day to each other, if we aren't in the office. And then it almost gives that sort of office feel, you know, and then you develop a relationship with your colleagues where you're not afraid to pick up the phone and ask them a question. You don't feel stupid. And yeah, giving, you know, just being honest and being like, I actually do need you to sort of tell me how to do this, and tell me a couple of times and then I'll get it. And I suppose, yeah, not being afraid as the junior member to go and ask for that help and say, actually, I want to hear what you say all day, you know, and learn from that, I think is helpful as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're moving into a new role, I think I mean, especially if it's a high focus, and I'm speaking from experience here, but you're really learning a vast range of, you're learning the industry in the sector, you're learning the discipline, you're learning how that business does that discipline and all the processes attached to it. You're learning all of your colleagues and how they work, which is very difficult without body language and cadence. You're learning the clients. There's a lot. And saying, I don't know, is easily the best gift that you are ever going to give yourself.
I would say your first roles are the ones which stay longest in your mind, at least in my mind. Well, I think back to my first roles, those are very formative experiences, emotionally and professionally. So I can remember exactly what I was doing the first few years of my career. That's like, I need to think harder about like the middle section. So I think it's true, but it's like, it's such a responsibility of the employer to, you know, really sit down with staff, especially if it's remote, just to explain, you know, who the agency is, what they do, the clients, and dynamics with the team. So it's much more of an attentive, it's much more of a difficult process compared to IRL. But, you know, a lot of this responsibility does fall on senior team members to nurture and coach and help junior staff feel comfortable. You know, but it's difficult. You know, if you know, a lot of junior staff are, you know, working from their bedrooms, they might not have all the right kits. You know, we've never worked in an office environment before. It's like stuff we take for granted, you know, having worked in many years in the industry. You can't assume that junior staff know these things. And they need to be taught somehow.
I'm conscious of time, so we've got one more question. So someone said, love to hear what you guys think of the growing calls for a 4-day working week. Do you think this can work in the PR industry?
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, okay, there's always, I mean, PR by nature, there are certain things that are always going to be urgent. If you're entering PR and you're entering comms, I think depending on what sector and industry you're in, there has to be some kind of preparation that actually it can be a 4-day working week, but if you have to jump on it, you have to jump on it. That's also the case for me, regardless of whether I'm doing comms or content for someone. Sometimes there is an urgent need and I need to jump on it. That's the nature of the job. But I actually think, I don't know, I mean, a 5-day working week is counterintuitive. I don't think that you get as much done as you can in a 4-day working week. That might just be who I am. And I'm also being a hypocrite because I work 5 days at the minute. But the ultimate goal is to work 4. So
I think, yeah, I work most days, but I just have to. But I'm not opposed to the idea at all. If those 4 days are super quality and client needs are met, absolutely, why not? You know, some countries are doing 4 days a week. I think they seem to be doing quite well, but you know, I think each company needs to make that call on an individual basis. You know, one of my account directors works 3 days a week, and he does an incredible job. Absolutely goes. He probably works 4 days a week, but you know, he just wants to be, you know, on paper 3 days a week, and I'm totally fine with that. He's got a senior strategic role. He feeds into the team, and that works really well. The other AD works 5 days a week, so it entirely depends on what the company needs and if that matches what the, you know, the resource the employee can provide. Yeah,
I think people will make it work regardless, and I think it will probably happen in my lifetime. Yeah, like Rana, because I have the business, because I am freelance full time, I do work a lot at the moment, but the ultimate aim is a 4-day working week. And yes, sometimes it means, you know, Sunday morning coffee is alongside my emails. That is the nature of what I do right now, but it won't always be, and that's absolutely in my trajectory. What I will say is, if I was hiring someone, I wouldn't hire them on the basis of a 5-day working week period. It would be a normal salary, an annual salary, that it would be the same equivalent, and it would be 4 days, non-negotiable.
Right, well, I'm conscious of the time, so we might have to leave that there, but I wanted to say a huge thank you to you both for this discussion this afternoon. It's been very, very interesting. I've been taking away lots of things as well, so I hope everyone else has too. So yeah, huge thank you. Thank you to everyone who's joined as well. And yeah, any other questions, do just let us know and we can get them answered for you guys. But otherwise, yeah, thank you very much again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week.
Absolutely.
Friday.
Thank you so much, guys.
Fabulous. Thank you, guys.
Take care. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.